If you have or suspect you may have a health problem, or if you require answers to specific healthcare questions or concerns, you should consult your physician or healthcare provider and not depend solely on information presented in this program.
Coming up today on To Your Health, celiac disease. It's a condition that's relatively new to the public, but it's started a gluten-free craze. According to the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, there has been a 300% increase in the number of people who report switching to a gluten-free diet in the last 5 years, even while the prevalence of celiac disease remains stable. That means more people are giving up bread when they don't have to. Today, we'll talk to the leading experts on celiac disease about what it is, how to manage the symptoms, whether everyone should go on a gluten-free diet, not just celiacs, and what the latest research shows. That's all coming up next on To Your Health. Hi, I'm Portland Helmich. We're talking today about celiac disease. According to the National Foundation for Celiac Awareness, about 1 in 100, or 3 million Americans, have celiac disease, and as many as 18 million have some non-celiac sensitivity to gluten, a protein that's found in wheat, rye, and barley. While the number of cases is on the rise, even those not diagnosed are getting on the gluten-free bandwagon. But is that a good idea? Joining us is Dr. Peter Green, who's here to separate fact from fiction when it comes to gluten and celiac disease. Dr. Green is the founder and director of the Celiac Disease Center at Columbia University. He's authored multiple books on the subject, including Celiac Disease, A Hidden Epidemic, and Gluten Exposed, the science behind the hype and how to navigate to a healthy, symptom-free life. Dr. Green, it's so good to have you here.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Portland.
So celiac disease, we hear that more and more, but I think a lot of us still don't really know what it is. In a nutshell, how do you describe it to the layperson?
Sure. So celiac disease is a condition in which people develop an immune response and get an inflammatory disorder in their intestine when they ingest gluten. So you've got to have a particular genetic makeup, and that's actually very common. You've got to be eating gluten, and then there's this great risk of having celiac disease. It occurs in about 1% of the population.
And what are the main symptoms?
Well, they vary tremendously, and that's one of the reasons why so many are undiagnosed. They're gastrointestinal symptoms. Many people have actually had a previous diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome.
An incorrect diagnosis?
Incorrect, because they have celiac disease. Mm-hmm. And then there's a whole spectrum of things like osteoporosis, anemia, indigestion and heartburn, infertility, various neurological problems. The list is actually quite extensive.
Are you saying that if you don't address it, those are some of the problems that you can encounter?
Yes, they can be the presenting symptoms of celiac disease.
Who's most at risk?
Anyone who has a particular genetic makeup. We actually did a study here in the United States, and we looked at a whole bunch of biopsies, actually 500,000 of them, and the ethnic group in the United States with the greatest rate of celiac disease were from a particular area of northern India.
Really?
Yeah.
Northern India?
Northern India. Traditionally, people have said, it's an Irish disorder, or you've got to be Italian. In fact, it occurs in any ethnic group, but within the United States, that ethnic group, people from the Punjab, have the highest rate, actually.
Now, when I was growing up, I didn't hear people talk about celiac disease. It seems much more common these days. It's on the rise. Why is that?
It is on the rise. It's actually on the rise. It's increased about 4 to 5-fold over the last 50 years, okay? But the greatest number of people are not diagnosed. So it's gone up in parallel to other autoimmune conditions, like type 1 diabetes has gone up, hypothyroidism has gone up, and celiac disease, because we regard celiac disease as an autoimmune condition. And for some reason, our modern society is leading to more people to get this condition. So it's gone up to about 1% of the population, but by far, the bulk of that 1% are not diagnosed.
But we don't really know why it's going up, just modern living?
Well, modern living, and it actually fits in with this hygiene hypothesis that we're all cleaner than our forefathers were, and our body doesn't have to deal with all these infections and we're living longer, and there's more autoimmunity.
Okay.
So there are other risk factors, such as taking antibiotics, using particular medicines, children born in the summer, children
Really?
born by cesarean section, people who get gastroenteritis, they're all at an increased risk of getting celiac disease.
So how do you get tested for it?
The diagnosis is pretty simple. The most difficult issue is the doctor thinking of it. Because if the doctor thinks of it, he can order a blood test. If it's positive, you're recommended to have an endoscopy and a biopsy of the small intestine, because the primary pathology is in the intestine. While the symptoms may be throughout the body, dental abnormalities, itchy rash, the primary diagnosis is made by a biopsy of the small intestine.
And so if you get a diagnosis of celiac disease, what do? You cut out gluten.
Gluten, yeah. So that's easier said than done.
Because
okay.
it's so ubiquitous, right?
Yeah. There are those gluten-free foods called like fruit and vegetables, meat and dairy. But products that are prepared often have gluten added, like soy sauce has gluten in it. Lipstick may have gluten in it.
Really?
Being on a gluten-free diet is very much more difficult in this day and age when we really don't know what they're doing to our food. Like some of these over-the-counter medical products or dietary supplements that people seem to be taking a lot of, we don't really know what's in them because there's no regulation of that industry. And so one study showed that a lot of herbal products actually had wheat flour in it that was not on the label. So it can be very tricky for people who have celiac disease.
So they do a lot of reading of labels.
Reading of labels, people are advised to see an expert dietitian, but it's tricky, and it's tricky eating out.
Right. So to be clear, you're cutting out wheat, rye, barley. So you're not
and
eating
any product that is derived from
it. So, but does that basically mean you're cutting out bread and bagels and cookies?
And pasta. Bread and pasta and cookies, bagels, etc. And we did a study, all the products, like the gluten-free pasta and breads, they're very much more expensive. So people, while they find it hard to be on a gluten-free diet, are subjected to much greater expense, unfortunately.
So many people today are following a gluten-free diet, but they don't necessarily have celiac disease. Is that a good idea?
A gluten-free diet saves people's lives if they've got celiac disease. But if you don't have celiac disease, we don't think that it's all that healthy a diet.
Why is that?
Well, it's low in fiber, and wheat flour is fortified in that iron and B vitamins are added to it. And rice flour, other non-gluten containing flours, are not fortified. And we actually see people on a gluten-free diet who are deficient in B vitamins. Another risky thing is that people eat a lot of rice, and rice flour.
And you can eat rice on a gluten-free diet.
Yep, that's a gluten-free grain. But rice, people who eat a lot of rice are at great risk to have elevated levels of heavy metals. And one study looked at a whole bunch of people on a gluten-free diet, some of whom had celiac disease, but the bulk didn't. And all of them had elevated levels of lead, mercury, arsenic, cadmium, and tin. So this isn't necessarily a very good thing, especially for a child with a developing brain.
Right. So it's a myth, if you don't have celiac disease, to think that if you go to the supermarket and you buy a gluten-free product, that you're actually buying something that's healthy.
Yeah, that's for sure. Another factor is, especially when you buy these products, things that make it taste good: salt, fat, sugar, and gluten.
Right.
You take one of those out and they add something else. If you get a low salt product, it's usually got more gluten and fat in it. So a low gluten containing or gluten-free product has a great risk to have more of those other products in it, such as fat, sugar.
So it might actually put weight on you.
We see that a lot.
Yeah.
We see that a lot. We are seeing more people who appear to be sensitive to gluten, in that they get like an irritable bowel syndrome when they eat gluten-containing products. And then we have a lot of people that are avoiding gluten for unclear reasons, you know, because the movie stars are doing it. It's a way of reducing weight because like the low-carb diet or the Atkins diet is actually a gluten-free diet. So any way of really markedly restricting your carbohydrates is a way of losing weight.
But is that okay?
Well, we don't think that a gluten-free diet is all that healthy for a number of reasons.
For a non-celiac?
For a non-celiac. It will save someone's life if they've got celiac disease. If you have celiac disease, there's increased mortality compared to the rest of the population. And that increase in mortality goes down to that of the general population after about 5 to 10 years on the diet.
And just quickly, as we're wrapping up here, are there any treatments that show promise?
There are multiple treatments. You know, it's very strange that celiac disease is so common, has increased mortality, and has a lot of symptoms, but hasn't been developed as a pharmaceutical treatment option. But there are drugs that are being developed. There are enzymes to digest the gluten that we don't digest. There are drugs that stop the gluten coming through into the bowel wall. People are developing vaccines. So there's tremendous promise for the future for people. But currently, the only treatment of celiac disease is a gluten-free diet.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you. It's really good information. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Portland.
When we come back, we'll talk with a leading nutritionist about how to navigate living with celiac disease and not let it diminish your quality of life. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is To Your Health, and today we're talking about celiac disease. Dr. Anne Roland Lee is an instructor of nutritional medicine at the Celiac Disease Center at Columbia University. Dr. Lee is involved in patient care, and her research has resulted in published articles on the effect of a gluten-free diet on quality of life, the nutritional adequacy of a gluten-free diet, the economic impact of a gluten-free diet, and on the cross-contamination of inherently gluten-free grains. And Dr. Lee's not only an expert by vocation, she herself is a celiac. Dr. Lee, it's so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So this is a personal issue for you. You have celiac disease yourself. When were you diagnosed?
It's actually an interesting story. I was already working at the Celiac Disease Center as their nutritionist and had published several articles on the impact of a gluten-free diet on quality of life. And at that time, my son stopped growing, which to me was a red flag. So I asked his pediatrician to test him, and he was positive. And celiac disease is a genetic disease. And so if he was positive, I then had myself, my 2 daughters, and my mother tested as well. And both my mother and myself were also positive, and my 2 girls are fine.
But did you have any symptoms?
My symptoms were some that were just common. I was a single mom with 3 kids in school, working full-time, so I was tired, had low iron, low cholesterol, and I thought, you know, that was just normal. So no symptoms that you would really, you know, as a female, seek medical care, but yet those are very common symptoms that we see in many of our female patients. Kind of that constellation of a little bit of reflux, a little bit of anemia, maybe occasional constipation, but nothing that would really raise a red flag.
So when you got this diagnosis, how did you have to make changes yourself and within your family?
It was actually interesting. After counseling patients for so many years on a gluten-free diet, I found the first time I went into the grocery store, and I'm a professional, and I was thinking of buying things for my son for his lunch, and I cried. You know, so it is...
You cried because it was so difficult?
The emotional impact of it, not because of the difficulty, but just the life-changing nature of being on a gluten-free diet. But that said, once you embrace it, it can be a healthy diet if you make the right choices. But it is a big lifestyle change.
Well, talk about that. So in what way is it a lifestyle change?
It's a lot of the spontaneity. Is what you have to navigate, where someone will say, oh, let's quickly go out to dinner. But you have to think about the type of restaurant, what foods they are preparing. Are there risks of cross-contamination in the kitchen? Will there be something that you could actually order that would be gluten-free and safe? So that's what really pushed forward even more of my research on the impact of the diet on quality of life. I had done some research on it, but then after my son and I were both diagnosed, you realize that further implication. And we see the impact of the diet is greatest in that social area of one's life. And especially for young children to navigate school lunch,
that must be really difficult.
play dates, and then as the kids grow, there's the issues of dating and, going to college and, travel. So there's many, many different aspects.
So give me a sense of what's in your pantry and refrigerator.
It's actually a beautiful thing because there's so many naturally gluten-free foods. So in my fridge, it's full of fresh fruits and vegetables. And I'm not just saying this because I'm a dietitian. I happen to love these foods. Cheese and dairy are all naturally gluten-free. Any of your meat, fish, or poultry, canned beans, nuts, those are all fine. The things that are different in my pantry would be my bread, my pasta, my crackers, my flours that I would use to bake with. Those all need to be gluten-free. And that's the thing that as we've learned more about this, because we were diagnosed back in 2004, that the whole environment around a gluten-free diet has changed and evolved. And where it was difficult to find products then, it's significantly easier now. And the prices are actually not as high as they were that long ago as well.
Do you think that following a gluten-free diet is as nutritious as a regular diet for celiacs?
For celiacs, it's the only medication. I mean, that is your treatment for celiac disease. The diet can absolutely be nutritionally sound if you make wise choices. But that's being said, that's the same for anyone. If we choose to eat our fruits and vegetables and lean meats and use our lower fat dairy products for our calcium source, it's a beautifully balanced diet. If you gravitate towards the cookies and donuts and whatnot, no matter what diet you're on, that's not good, gluten-free or not. For the non-celiac, however, it's a little different. The gluten-free products that are necessary for those with celiac disease do tend to be higher in sugar, fat, and salt to try to make them more tastier, more like their wheat-based counterparts.
Dr. Green, who was on earlier, was just saying the same thing.
Right, that they need to do something. Now, because the products are not as nutritionally sound, you have to use them as your replacements, but there's so many other choices.
Help me understand when I go into the supermarket and I see all of these gluten-free products, help me understand the labeling. Because I look at them and I think, oh, it's gluten-free, it must be healthy.
And it's not. Gluten-free only means that it doesn't have wheat, rye, or barley. Unfortunately, in the US, the gluten-free labeling law is a voluntary law. And this is why we often see it on foods that don't need to be gluten-free. You'll often see broccoli labeled as gluten-free or teas labeled as gluten-free. What we need to have labeled gluten-free are those grain-based products. So your breads, your pastas, your crackers, and things. But that law only says that the manufacturer is claiming that the product meets the standard of being under 20 parts per million. It is a voluntary law. They do not have to use that labeling. It also means because it's not mandated that it's up to the manufacturer to do the testing. It's not tested unless there is a complaint by the government.
So if you have celiac disease and you're not allowed to eat bread and pasta and whatnot, can you have just a little bit though? Can you eat it in moderation?
Actually, no.
You really have to say goodbye to the bread forever.
You have to say goodbye to the bread forever. You need to think of celiac disease like an allergy. You wouldn't, if you had a nut allergy, you wouldn't eat peanuts. And the same thing applies to celiac disease. You're not going to have the imminent reaction that you would with a nut allergy.
Right, you're not going to feel anything if you eat
bread. You might.
See,
that's the thing. Our patient population or people with celiac disease are very varied. Some are very symptomatic. They will have, just crumbs from the toaster will get into their dish, and they could get very sick and have GI upset or migraines or things. We have other people that have been served the wrong dish and had no symptoms at all. The philosophy is that you need to keep the diet as strictly as possible, avoiding any cross-contamination. In a home where you have both gluten-containing products and gluten-free, people really need a separate toaster because in a vertical toaster, there are crumbs and things that stick.
Wow.
And those crumbs can cause damage.
Different cutting boards.
Different cutting boards, a different colander for your pasta. If you had a sifter to bake goods, you would need a different sifter.
So if you go to a restaurant, how do you know that what you're eating has not been cross-contaminated?
We educate our patients to go in and say, although it's not medically correct, but to say that they have an allergy to wheat and their food needs to be prepared separately or they will get sick. Now, again, it's not that imminent reaction, but the food service staff thinks of those allergy precautions that they would take, and hopefully they will follow through on that.
And more restaurants are starting to become aware of things like
They
celiac
are,
disease.
and even in New York, there are several restaurants that are 100% gluten-free.
Mhm.
So that there are more and more options.
So you can still have a life.
You can have a life, and that's what we really want our patients to take away, is that it is this rigid diet, and you control it where you can. We don't say go and have bread, but also don't restrict your social life. You need to go out. You need to enjoy those things, but cautiously.
So it's not a death sentence.
Not at all. It's wonderfully surprising how many people come back and say, you know, I never knew that so many of these foods tasted good. We also, for some of our younger patients, because I take care of pediatrics as well, that often for some of the school-age children who are saying, oh, but the donuts, I challenge them to get a map and to investigate the various cuisines throughout the world that are inherently gluten-free. In Ethiopia, the traditional bread is a flatbread made from teff flour. Thai food tends to be naturally gluten-free. A lot of Mexican dishes are naturally gluten-free. So I encourage them to go explore different cuisines and really open their palate that way. And it just becomes more of an educational, happy journey that also leads them down a road of gluten-free eating.
Pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
When we come back, our friends from God's Love We Deliver are going to join us to whip up a gluten-free meal that's not only celiac friendly, but totally delicious. Welcome back. We're here with Chef Andre Daquigan and nutritionist Lisa Zullig from God's Love We Deliver in New York City. Every day, God's Love cooks and delivers 6,200 delicious, nutritious meals customized to the health needs of their clients living with all kinds of life-altering illnesses. And today, we're going to prepare a delicious and totally gluten-free meal that anyone can enjoy. Chef Andre and Lisa, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So anybody can enjoy this. It's a vegetarian meal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And also good for people with celiac.
Yes, it's completely gluten-free. And actually, a lot of the foods that we're using today promote gut health. So the prebiotic bacteria in your system need food, and they get that from prebiotic fiber that's found in vegetables and legumes. So the lentils we're using today and the vegetables will help feed the good gut flora and help keep your digestive tract healthy.
So what exactly are we making, Chef Andre?
We are making lentil vegetable stew, and this is one of those brilliant one-pot meals, right? So we're going to start off.
Throw it all in, mix it all together.
That's exactly right.
I like cooking like that.
Exactly. You know, especially if you're a busy family or, you know. So we're going to start off by sautéing some shallot.
So what's important in this meal, Lisa, is that we do not have any gluten, which means that we do not have what precisely?
Wheat, rye, barley, nothing that would be offensive to someone who has celiac disease.
Let's see, that's cumin, coriander, and a little bit of turmeric, all right? So we've got that. We're gonna add our peppers, carrots. Those are carrots. I should know that.
Now, what about tofu, Lisa? What about the health benefits of tofu?
It's a plant-based protein, low fat, very healthy for everyone. So we recommend that our clients eat a plant-based diet regularly. So every week we send at least one vegetarian meal to our clients, which often includes tofu.
Now, if you are someone who has celiac disease and you would like to have protein with this, you absolutely could add it.
Well, the protein's in the tofu and in the lentils.
And animal protein, if you wanted to add an animal protein.
Absolutely, you could. And you could also add, serve it with a gluten-free grain, like quinoa or brown rice or amaranth, potatoes, whatever you chose. Yeah.
But it's just as delicious, just like this.
Absolutely.
Now, the lentils are pre-cooked.
The lentils are pre-cooked, and they were cooked in some vegetable stock. Can you hand me that vegetable stock? Thank you so much. All right, so I'm just gonna pour this. sizzle, 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 sizzle.
Much vegetable stock, a few cups.
A couple of cups. You almost want to cover it, but you don't want to turn it into a soup, right?
And the main reasons, Lisa, that this is good for gut health are?
That it's prebiotic. It helps maintain healthy gut flora by feeding the probiotics in your system. And it also is a good source of soluble fiber with all the foods actually in there are a good source of soluble fiber, which helps move your digestive system and also lower cholesterol, keep blood sugar in line. It's just overall healthy.
You know, what's interesting about a lot of these foods that are healthy for people with celiac disease or other conditions like diabetes or heart disease or whatnot is that if it's healthy for someone with those conditions, it's healthy for all of us.
Generally, yes, yeah.
It smells really good.
It does, doesn't it? I mean, you can't go wrong with fresh ingredients. Good ingredients are the key to any good meal, right? So,
and a colorful plate is a healthy plate.
Absolutely. It is. There's the nutrition behind it, but also the eye appeal for our clients who are ill. They often have a low appetite, and getting them to eat, like you eat through your eyes, all your senses. So this will help boost appetite and actually have the help
because
them
it
eat more.
looks appetizing.
Yeah.
It doesn't just smell appetizing, taste appetizing. It looks appetizing.
That's right. Mm-hmm. It's got to work all of the senses,
it does,
right?
and that
really
certainly looks beautiful.
Especially, let's get your tasting bowl over here.
This is my very big bowl. I'm going to eat out of here.
So this would normally be served with a gluten-free starch of some sort.
Right. You could add that. You could layer it, or you could add it on the side.
This looks like, you could fill this up and this could be served at a restaurant.
Definitely. This is not unlike things you would find in vegetarian restaurants or even like Indian restaurants, places where they respect vegetables and vegetarian cuisine.
Is this kind of an Indian dish, would you say?
Well, you know what? I think some of the flavor profiles are Indian in here, but then again, anytime you use multiple spices correctly or inventively, again, you're going back to the mother continent of Asia, right? Because the Indians, they taught us all we need to know about the utilization of certain spices, right? So we've got that, and I'm gonna pour sauce.
Don't burn yourself.
Very good.
Wow.
And
that looks like quite a meal, does it not?
There we go.
It's a one-pot complete meal.
It is.
Yeah. But this is not a one-person serving.
No.
No.
And we've got some chive here, right?
Oh, look, and you put it on, look at that. Now that looks like a restaurant.
You
know what you're doing.
Would you like to taste?
I would.
Yay.
Okay. So, yum. I love lentils so much.
Lentils are so wonderful.
Because they're filling, right?
They are. They keep you full longer.
So good.
Yay.
Delicious. Delicious. Really great. Thank you so much for being here. So, if you have celiac disease, if you want to lose weight, if you have any kind of disease, you want to eat this.
Right. It's the cure-all, essentially.
Right.
Food is medicine, and food is one of the great things of life. So enjoy.
Thank you so much for being here. Such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So everyone, that's our show today. Check out our show page for more information on this episode. Thank you so much for watching. Here's to your health. I'm Portland Helmich.